Got it.
Hey everyone, welcome to Tea and Chocolate. I am absolutely excited today because I've read this amazing book about a couple of months ago, and it's called The Enchanted Hour. You can see I've got all these pages and I've totally highlighted the book as well. This book is absolutely beautiful. The tagline is the miraculous power of reading aloud in the age of distraction. The author is Meghan Cox Gurdon, who is with me today. Meghan, thank you so much for joining me. I so appreciate this.
I am so glad. Yeah. Hold it right up. I'll show. I've got the original hardback here.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, isn't that nice? That was the original, but they wanted to make it, I think, give it more of a parenting feel for the.
Oh, really? For this one? Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, you can get it under. Actually, it looks like this. There's a German edition that looks like this.
Oh, yeah.
There's an English edition that looks, well, it's actually not dissimilar, the original to this, and then the second one is a little bit like that. It's coming out in Romanian soon.
Wow.
It's coming out in Catalan, also like wonderful languages. And it's hopefully coming out in Mandarin Chinese too, which is going to be excellent. Yeah.
Do you have a choice in that, or do they
No. The process is, you go through your book. I mean, this is my one and only book, so this is my one taste of it. So I may be getting some of this wrong, but my experience has been that essentially you write the book for your domestic audience, and then your agent or the agency then takes it and suggests it to publishers abroad, and some of them pick it up on it, and some don't. Oh, it's also in Spanish, I should say. It's all over Latin America, which is really thrilling, actually. That people in Latin America are very excited about the message.
Wow.
Yeah, and then there's a time lag, of course, because it has to be translated, and I'm sure the wheels of these things turn slowly. It's a lot, right, to translate a book, and
right.
Yeah, so I don't, but I mean, it's I will say it is an unmitigated joy and a thrill and honor to know that one's work is being read overseas, and by people who you may never get to meet or see, but just to know that it's out there it's lovely.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell us, or me, a little bit about the other work that you do before we delve into
my day job is and has been for about 16 years now. I write about children's books for the Wall Street Journal. So I have a weekend column. It's in the Saturday paper, and it started out pretty small in 2005, which was actually coincidentally the same. The column started about the same time my youngest daughter was born. So it's an easy way for me to remember how long I've been doing it. And it started out as a once a month thing, just 300 words. And then a few years later, it got bumped into a once a week thing, and it's gotten longer and longer. So it's about 1,000 words once a week now. And I look at all kinds of books, everything from babies to teenagers and everything in between, graphic novels, nonfiction novels. There's an abundance of children's books being published. We are in a kind of golden age, certainly in terms of quantity, but also just the design and the art. You and I were talking before we pressed record that, there's just really some exquisite bookmaking being done, and our children are really spoiled for beauty with the books that we have access to now.
Where do you think that recent inspiration comes from?
You mean recent
with children's books, this sort of?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, art kind of
ebbs and flows, or
it ebbs and flows. Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, which is not to say there wasn't wonderful work being done, 20 years ago. I mean, there are also, it's just, I am just very conscious of the sophistication of so much design now. I mean, I think graphic design we've really as a culture embraced graphic design and its possibilities for enhancing the feeling of things, and I think that has translated, any product. I mean, look, I don't know, not to take sides, but let's say how beautiful an Apple box is, and how carefully cosmetics companies think about how it feels when you open and close a compact, like that aesthetic quality is so enhanced in contemporary culture. And this is very much to be seen in children's books. I think there's just wonderful a wonderful kind of conversion of technique and artistry and inexpensive printing too, right? That's got to help.
Right. So I want to say a little quote here. You were at some friend's home. I can't remember what their names were. I think her name was Lisa.
Yeah, Lisa and Kirk Wolfinger. Yep.
Right. And she and Kirk said she's just reading to the boys.
Well, okay, so let me preface this for anyone who hasn't read the book. So
Yeah.
essentially, this was my little my moment on the road to Damascus, where I was knocked off my horse by a revelation.
Right.
That was this. My husband and I were attending this dinner party at the home of these friends. He wasn't my husband yet.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure we were engaged. I think we probably were, but anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend Lisa got married before I did and had a couple of little boys, maybe 2 or 3 little boys by this point. She ultimately had 4. And so we're having a normal dinner party, you know, adults, right? You're all standing around, everybody's drinking, gin and tonics or whatever, chat. Dinner is going to be, you can smell it cooking. And then my friend, the hostess, just disappeared from the room, went off. And I thought, as you do, like, oh, she's going to stir something or she's going to call us to dinner in a minute.
Yeah.
She was gone. She'd come back. And eventually it was like, something, what's going on? And so somebody asked her husband, Kirk, where's Lisa? Is everything okay? And he said, oh yeah, she's just reading to the boys. And for me, it was like, I thought, that's it. She's reading to the boys. She was reading to them, first of all, which is a wonderful thing, which I hadn't spent a lot of time around children. I didn't know, but I knew that must be something wonderful. She was putting it first. She was putting them first,
right?
And literature first, right? That whole,
yeah.
Ahead even of us. Now, you might say it's kind of a quirky thing, but I just thought she was showing me, she was modeling how reading aloud could be, I used this phrase once in a piece about it, the central civilizing part of family life. And so I resolved in that moment, if ever I had children, I would do the same thing. And I did have children. I had 5 children, and it was indeed the thing. And so I will say, there are other parts of my life in which I have not been a perfect citizen, but in terms of reading aloud to my children, it is definitely the best thing I have done for them as a mother, bar none. And I owe it very much to the example of this friend of mine who was just so great.
Yeah, well, I think I would have responded the same as you, particularly because she did put her children first.
Yeah, it's great, right? And it's really taught me something. I've reflected on this a lot because it's come up in the context of the book when I, talk to other people about it. The model that we provide for other people is so much more powerful than we think. I think that we're all of us habituated to understanding that, our behavior in the home models for our children, right? What's expected. Yeah. But it isn't just that, it's much broader than that. And, there's a guy who writes for the Wall Street Journal. His name is Dan Ariely. He's a behavioral scientist out West. I think at Stanford, don't hold me to it. And he once had a little piece where he wrote about, so people will write in and ask for advice in life. And someone said, is it true that people put, bear with me on this anecdote, it's kind of long, but is it true that people, when you go to a cafe or something, if the tip jar is full of dollars or $5 bills or full of coins, will people leave more if it's full of dollar bills and less for a tip if it's full of coins? And his answer was yes. Because why? Because we're modeling for each other all the time, and we're picking up on each other's signals all the time, to the degree that we will part with more money in a tip if the jar is full of, we just unconsciously want to align ourselves with the expected behavior. And so in the context of reading aloud, going back to this anecdote with my friend,
yes,
she cannot have known that night that by doing that, she influenced my life influenced my children, my life turned into this book. This book is out in the world influencing other people. It's fabulous, and it speaks to the power of modeling. So I think reading aloud is kind of a private activity, but there are ways in which we can make it more public, like my friend did, like I did here, like you are doing right now with this conversation. We're sending out these ripples, and it cannot help but have good effects.
Yeah. Thanks for giving that example. That's amazing.
It's a long, sorry, I'm the longest anecdote teller in the world.
Oh, don't. I love it. No. Okay. So, okay. So reading aloud. Why should we do it? There's something interesting that you said about it cultivates empathy, dramatically accelerates young children's language acquisition. And I'm sure there's much more. So would you like to touch on that?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So why read aloud? Reading aloud is a very special activity because it brings together so many wonderful domains of life in this one single kind of cozy act. Mm-hmm. So what do we do when we read aloud? We have, there's one person reading, there's maybe one or a couple of people listening. There is a text of some sort that we're reading from. There's the sound of our voice. And in that very simple exchange of say, me reading to you and you listening, we know from, and there's all, I won't go into all the details about it now, but I commend your listeners or viewers to have a look at the book because the evidence is there.
Yes.
We know from brain studies and behavioral science that there is a tremendous amount of harmonization and alignment that is going on between people when reading aloud is taking place. Brain patterns synchronize. Right. Our bodies are sort of physiologically rewarded by this kind of the placidity of the exchange. There is, in the brains of babies and toddlers in particular, there's a tremendous amount of lighting up, of the brain, of the activation of the major brain domains. There's a lot of communication between those major brain domains, and that's very important in developing the architecture of a child's brain as he or she grows. So it's wonderful, and we can think of it as a brain building exercise. And by the way, not just for children, it's also been shown to be extremely helpful for older adults in opening up and traveling down some of those mental corridors that might have gotten musty with disuse. Right. It's good for the brain. It's good for the heart in terms of being physiologically soothing and very rewarding. It kind of alleviates feelings of stress. When two people sit down to read together, hormonally things shift. There's like a chemical shift that takes place. Cortisol, which is the stress hormone and kind of can be destructive in our bodies, those levels go down. Levels of oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, those increase. So it's like this virtuous circle that gets established. So we have brain, we have heart, we have relationships. Our relationships are enhanced by this time together, again, because of all this biofeedback that we get. Also, we're creating a common store of kind of a common experience of a story taking place in the story. As we listen to the story, we're together in the story. And that's very good. Common vocabulary. It just goes on and on. So we have brain, heart, relationship, culture. Yeah. There's more we can say. This is a culture building thing. Yeah. Because, literature is this, as we know, it's this fantastic generative force, but it is locked inside books. Right? If we don't read them, they aren't getting read. And if they aren't getting read, that art form isn't perpetuating itself, or that particular form of that art. So any particular book isn't perpetuating itself forward in time. And so when we read, especially generationally, like a mother to her son or a woman to her father, because of course it goes in all directions. Anybody can read aloud. We are not just experiencing and, as it were, enjoying that particular piece of literature, but we're making sure that it itself is shared. So it's, again, I warned you, I am the longest anecdote speaker in the world, but it is kind of extraordinary how much reading aloud can achieve. Mm-hmm. It's highly recommended as a life-enhancing activity.
Right. And I see that you do that on your Instagram. You share stories all the time.
I did that during the lockdown. I did that during the lockdown. I stopped after a while because, the whole internet went crazy with other topics, but yeah, I think I'd like to go back to it again. It was a really wonderful, we were locked down for whatever it was, 4 months, and I was, at home with my family. And it was really a great, it was a gift to myself, honestly, to be able to read aloud and send it out into the world for people who were also locked down. And of course, the internet being what it is, those recordings are all still there on Instagram. I'll just say parenthetically, I think I'm at Meghan Cox Gurdon on Instagram.
Yes, you are.
That's who I am. Yeah.
What, so do you have a practice of reading aloud, like to yourself or with
I have been. Interestingly, that you should say that.
Yeah.
Normally I don't. It depends on how, kind of the complexity of the work that I'm reading. Sometimes I just, if a book, I just recently read a really interesting book. It's called Family Lexicon by Natalia Ginsberg, who I didn't know anything about, but she's a very important woman in Italian letters. And it's a memoir of her family during the Mussolini years. And
oh, wow.
And she has a very unusual, to me, style, incredibly clear, funny, direct. And I was reading it to myself out loud because it was so good. Like it was to read it in my head, it went too fast, and I wanted to relish every word. This is something I'd love to say about reading aloud. One of the things I love about it is you really, as when you listen to an audiobook, and of course that is somebody reading aloud to you, you occupy the reader has to say every word for the thing to make sense. When we read with our eyes, it can be quite easy for us to zoom along and not quite get the full impact of every word. We can read faster than we can speak.
Yeah.
When you slow it down and you read every word, and you have that infinitesimal pause with the commas, and you stop with the period, and you shift a little bit with the paragraph change of whatever, you're really sitting in literature and in writing in a much more kind of real-time way. And from that, you can, I think, you can extract a great deal more richness very often than in reading. I mean, of course, there's that wonderful immersive feeling when you're reading a book and it's like you're just completely disappeared into the story.
Yeah.
But one of the things I would say that many of us are finding, I think I'm speaking for others, and it's safe to do so in this, with our reliance on technology, it's making it harder to have those deep reading experiences. And so reading aloud offers a way to get back to that, in a way that you can, in some ways, almost the more artful or spare the style of writing, the greater the reward of slowing it down and reading it out loud. Because there's, the author has gone to a great deal of trouble to construct those sentences. And if you're just skipping over them, that author's work is in vain, and you're maybe getting it. But boy, you slow it down word for word, you get a great deal of juice out of what's been written.
Well, I would agree, because I've experienced it myself.
Yeah.
Right?
You read to yourself?
Yeah. Like if I read out loud, it's like I have to take myself into a completely different space.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And I'm not, and I'm not, I guess, like used to it.
Yeah.
Right. It's a switch for sure.
It is. And you've hit on something important there.
Yeah.
Which is that reading aloud is not like the rest of life. And it is a little weird sometimes. It can feel weird, and it's not always easy, right? You have to push past that weirdness. I the first time I read to my husband, he had listened a lot of, when I was reading to the children over the years, he would come and listen sometimes. I mean, he was used to hearing me read. But when it was just the two of us sitting on the sofa, he'd make us a little cocktail, and I'd get out a novel and I'd read to him. And it was kind of exciting and quite intimate. Also weird, like it's just kind of weird. I'm reading to my husband. And then you get past it, right? Then you just get pushed past it. But you're right. The sound of your own voice doing it can sound sort of artificial or a little bit strange. And sometimes I tried reading to my dad, for instance, he and I had always talked about we had talked about reading Conrad's Lord Jim and talking, like having our own little book club, and somehow we'd never gotten to it. So I thought, oh, I'll read him Lord Jim. It just did not work. It just didn't work. It was maybe a different dynamic would have been better. There were too many subordinate clauses. It was just getting too difficult. So that was a case of fatal weirdness. It killed the book, and we haven't been able to go back to it, sadly. But
what
yeah,
happens?
sorry.
That's okay. What happens when you're not being read to as a child? What are we missing out on? I know that all the things that you've listed.
Yeah.
But how does it impact us?
You know what? Children miss out on an enormous opportunity to develop their language. If you think about how a child acquires language, it is through hearing speech. And that's, and that's true. I mean, you think about like babies. I mean, it's a couple of years often before they're speaking themselves, but they are hearing you speak and they're learning from you how to speak, what things are called, and they're slowly picking up the grammatical rules of the road and such from hearing speech. It's as Dante said, it's our native tongue. Speech is our native tongue.
Yeah.
So we are accustomed, we hear, we process, eventually we speak. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to this. There are people who are deaf and people who cannot speak and whatnot. But leaving that aside, for the vast majority of people, speech is how we acquire language. When we are reading to children, we are giving them not just, a dedicated time of infusing them with language. So they're getting new words are just flying at them from the text that we read. So they're not just getting that. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. But when we read to them, we're just, we're flooding them with language and we're increasing their ability to discern the different meanings of words by giving them different contexts and things like that. When children don't get that, they are correspondingly, at a time when their brains are growing very rapidly, and they're developing their first reservoir of vocabulary, and the bigger that reservoir is, the easier it is to add new words to it later. They're being denied that. They're missing out on that opportunity. And, it really shows up at school because Read Aloud, or children who have been read to, tend to start school about 18 months ahead of kids who have not been, in terms of their preparation. They're not necessarily developmentally farther ahead in other respects, but their capacity to, there are all sorts of, very useful skills that also come from this. They're accustomed to, they know what books are and how they work. They know how to sit still and listen to a story because they're habituated to the pleasure of sitting still and listening to a story. And most instruction, they're used to hearing what is being said to them and making sense of it. Most instruction in school, really right up through elementary school, is oral rather than written. So children just have this huge advantage when they get to school if they've been read to when they're little. And that advantage, it lasts and it accelerates. Again, attention is another thing. There are a lot of forces today conspiring to mess up our attention spans. But reading aloud in the home with children, helps them develop that nice long attention span that is so productive and also indicative of the development of grit and future success. And there are studies about this. I think what is it? The attention span persistence of 4-year-olds is correlated with their graduation levels. In high school and college. Yeah, it's really just like it's baked in early. A lot of this stuff, and so that's what's missing, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we do, read aloud. We send it out into the world. We talk about it. We model it for others because it's children whose parents don't have a lot of time, children whose parents aren't switched on or are shy in some way. They're the ones who need this the most, in a way. Can I just say one other thing about that? My book is called The Enchanted Hour. And that is how long I read to my children, because I just, with this example of my friend, it was just something I was just determined to make happen for them. It doesn't have to be an hour. And I wouldn't want any parent to feel like, I don't have an hour. I don't even have 5 minutes. Like, what are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. But the truth is, busiest parents, the most frenetic families, those are the families and the parents that will benefit the most from this. Because, as we were saying at the very beginning of our conversation, so much is packed into this one experience.
Yeah.
10 minutes of reading aloud is also 10 minutes of togetherness, 10 minutes of adult attention, 10 minutes of vocabulary, 10 minutes of physiological reward. An hour is great. That's wonderful. You can do a lot in an hour, but you can also do a tremendous amount of good for yourself, for your relationships, for your family, for your children's, cognitive development in a much shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to play off what you were just saying there, because I was just made some notes from the book. When, parents are in particular circumstances, so divorce, illness, deployment, incarceration, business travel, parents serving in the armed forces. So yes, I can imagine you can speak on that a little bit in terms of like when you're not in ideal circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best thing of all, because it's the most packed with, shall we say, nutrients.
Yes.
Is being close together and being able to read. But we can't always have a perfect diet of nutrients. Yeah. And what we've seen, and it's really some of the examples I think are actually very intensely moving. That reading aloud, even if it's done in a kind of remote way, over the phone,
right,
over Zoom, over recordings, it still has so much to give. It's really, I mean, there's some really beautiful examples I write about in the book where, incarcerated mothers who can't hold their children, and their children can't be held by their mothers, but they can use their voices as a kind of caress. I mean, the voice is so powerful, and our brains, I forgot to say this earlier, but our brains, particularly the brains of little children, they're really primed for their mother's voices in particular. And when a mother speaks to a newborn, as opposed to any other woman speaking to a newborn, the language circuitry in the baby's brain just kind of, gets started. It fires up.
Right.
So and that, and so our mother's voices, I mean, voices are they're as particular as fingerprints. And so in cases where, parents are separated from their children, deployment, also there are wonderful charities that are supporting this kind of bridge building between the children at home and the parent in the field. Sometimes, by the way, I didn't realize this, but, sometimes people in the military are, they might not be in some remote and far-flung place, but they have just incredibly punishing hours. So they might be in the same town, but they scarcely have time to see their children when they're awake. And so, any little bit helps to keep parents and children connected, and to share that love of story, and to have the parent almost like the imprimatur of the parent on the interaction with books, that this is something that the parent values and that imparts that value to the child. And then again, they have the story in common. There's a great story in the book about a little baby whose dad was deployed. And I think he went to the Middle East. And the mother was quite nervous when the dad came home because, how is the baby going to respond to this? Is his father, but he doesn't know it. What does he know? He's only seen these little videos of his dad reading him Curious George. And in the story that's in the book, it was so wonderful. The mother told me about this. So she's nervous. And the dad came home, and the baby recognized the dad from the videos, rushed in his room with his little nappy on, and came running out again with Curious George and sat down on his dad's lap. Wow. I mean, honestly, it gives me goosebumps. And I've known this story for a long time, and I wrote about it, and it still gives me goosebumps. Yeah. It's just, it's wonderful that it can be used in this way. And I am really excited about the charities that support this, creating these links with parents and children.
Yeah, I was reading that. I just find that, I think that's fascinating. I mean, it just really adds to the mystery of life and who we are as human beings,
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things you've said in the book is that each family has its own anecdote. I love that, because you create memories, and they can just stay along with you. And
I mean, let's be fair, you can create memories in lots of ways, right?
Yes,
You do it through movies, they do it through songs, they do
absolutely.
it through,
Yeah.
goofy impressions or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, this is just one of those other ways of doing it. And one of the things I've really enjoyed is using the time reading with my children to share stories with them that I really wanted them to know, and wanted them to have. And then we have these points of reference. My youngest daughter in particular just absolutely loved a particular edition of the Iliad. And well, we have the Iliad and the Odyssey, this particular edition, retold by a woman called Gillian Cross. They're wonderful books. The illustrator is Neil Packer. It took him 10 years, like as long as the Trojan War, to make the illustrations for these books. But they're beautiful. And she just loved them. And I love those stories. And it comes up all the time. There'll be some little reference to Achilles or Hector or something. And that is something she could have got, of course, through school. But because these were stories that we experienced together repeatedly. She loved them. They're just part of our everyday vocabulary, the lotus eaters or the sirens or whatever, it's just kind of woven in. And I'm aware of that with my children. There are all these there's a scene in Robert Louis Stevenson's Kidnapped when, what's he called? Davy Balfour, is that the name of the character, I think? Gosh, I haven't read it in so long. He has this wicked uncle who's trying to trick him into falling to his death. And Davy Balfour goes, I think it's David Balfour. He's sent by the uncle out at night to go up some stone steps to get something for the uncle. This takes place in Scotland. And only a flash of lightning shows the young hero at the last second that he's been sent up to an unfinished floor. So the horrible uncle is trying to get him to plunge to his death. And for some reason, this comes up in our family all the time. Like, somebody's going upstairs and the lights aren't on. They're like, oh, I don't want to, is there another landing there? I can't even think of how it comes up. It just, for some reason, that scene comes to mind pretty often. No one's trying to kill anyone in our family. I hate to say, we don't even have any stone steps, but, and that's kind of, I don't know, not really germane, but it's just a token of how these, how these references can be woven in from the experience of reading together.
Right. In your own experience, like with your 5 children, have you ever talked about us as our own experience in life, that we're storytellers?
I don't know. I don't know that I have. Interesting though, because of course story is one of the human universals, right?
What do you think? This is the other thing. I love so many things that you said in the book. Meeting characters we would never encounter in the real world. I don't know why, but that just hits me. And I'm wondering,
it expands your horizons.
That's what I was just going to ask you. What do we get out of that?
Yeah. I mean, the argument for reading aloud there is very like the argument for literature itself, right? It's an opportunity for us to experience the world in a way that we can't from our own time and space-based reality. It's an opportunity to see the world through the eyes of others in a very specific and remarkable way. And filmmakers can do it too. I'm not claiming, the uniqueness of the art form. But again, one of the opportunities that we have with reading aloud is that we can really bring literature to life with our voices. We can, and this again is important to keep in mind with the context of children and with older people too, or anyone who's in a position where they can't necessarily read for themselves.
Right.
Not everybody is a great reader. Not everybody finds it effortless to disappear into literature.
Yeah.
And not everybody has the physical capacity to do it anymore. My mom, for instance, her vision has gone squiff with her illness. And so I'm reading to her because it's just a way for her to experience literature by using my voice as her entry point. So I have the opportunity and the pleasure and the privilege of bringing stories to life for her and again, in all these contexts it applies. And in doing so, giving the listener that access to this literature, to literature in its capacity to open our horizons. So kind of what I'm saying here is sort of folding back in on itself, but in other words, that everything that we can get from books, we can get for our listener anyway, without any effort, if it's read to us. Mm-hmm. And I think that lack of effort can be really transformative. I'll give you an example. Think of somebody who is, a boy or girl of say 12 or 13, who has never found it easy in English class. English class is always a struggle.
Yeah.
I was lucky that wasn't me, but that was me in math. I always wished, I still wish, that I could just effortlessly enjoy and appreciate math the way people who know it really can. For them, it's like an art form. It's this wonderland of things where it all makes sense. And I just never been able to get there. Mm-hmm. So imagine you're that kid, except for you, it's English or whatever language you're studying. Yeah. For someone to read to you, it's not you kind of struggling through the sentences, not really getting it feels like effort. Suddenly that person has opened to you everything that the book is actually trying to give you, right? Books aren't there to try and punish you. They're there to try and fill you with something. The person who reads to you liberates you from that decoding and short-term memory stuff and everything that goes into reading, and just gives it to you as a story. And a story heard orally, that is to say orally AU, is the most natural way that most of us have, historically, as a species. That's how we have taken in. That's how we've taken in, narrative. It comes to us as something we hear through the oral storytelling tradition. So it's such a gift when we read to someone. And there are studies to back this up. Children, especially that age group, there was a study done in England a few years ago, which is just amazing. When children who struggle with reading are just read to, not in a pedagogical way where the teacher stops every 5 minutes, do you understand this? What does that word mean? But just to experience it as a story, characters and scenes and drama and humor and whatever. They immediately improve in their academic capacity. It's like a, I don't know, a vitamin infusion. It's like an IV of English. Yeah. Kids make huge strides almost immediately when they're just given that gift. So, again, and that sadly that came out after the book was out, so I didn't have a chance to put it in there. But it really is just there's so many proofs and so many arguments for why this is. It's a great thing.
Is it appreciated and respected in academia? It is.
Right? I think I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I think I have been contacted by people who have been really frustrated because there was one woman in particular who basically devoted most of her professional life to trying to getting it into schools. Couldn't do it. There's a lot of resistance. I think that, and I've really hoped, although I will tell you that my book, when the first year it was out, was actually on the academic bestseller list. I think it was only one season, sadly, but the first September that it was out, which is very encouraging to me because that suggests that maybe in schools of education or whatnot, maybe it's being used, and that would be great. But it can look like nothing, and this is an important point, I think, that reading aloud can look really like nothing. It can, just the example I mentioned to you a minute ago about like the 12 or 13-year-olds, it can look like you're kind of doing it for them, like they're getting off the hook, they're getting a freebie, they're not really working. Yeah. And so there can be, I think, some resistance to that. If you're reading to the kid, why is the kid's not reading for him or herself? Right. I actually dispute that. I think the child is reading. The child is reading through a different method. Right. And also getting the content in a way that he or she might not be able to do some other way. And in fact, strengthening that child to then tackle books on their own, To say, I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's an embrace of it as there could be. And one of the many arguments for it, as a kind of additive in the school day is, not only is it good for children, but it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
It costs time.
Yes.
Time, I know, time is precious, and teachers have a lot to do, and such. Parents have a lot to do. So it does require time, but it doesn't require any expensive, whiteboards or laptops or iPads or any of that kind of thing. It certainly doesn't need any sound effects. There is a product being sold, which I'm not going to name, and it just breaks my heart every time I see some young teacher on Twitter saying, "Oh, it's so wonderful, we're using this product to make our read alouds come alive."
Yeah.
It's using technology, which is just not necessary, Children, I mean, we know that children can make a world out of a paper box when they're little. Well, they can make a world out of the words in their head. They do not need the mediation of technology to do it for them. And to suggest to them that that's how you make a story come alive is doing them a disservice, I think.
Yeah. Where do you think we're going with all this? I know that you've also noted the amount of screen time.
Yeah, and that was before the pandemic, right?
Like who's going to be accountable? Who's responsible for this?
Good question. I mean, if the last 2 years hasn't taught us anything, I mean, there isn't anybody in charge, right? We drift. We seem to drift from one thing to another. I mean, I guess I've always been I'm a slow adapter to most things, I suppose. And when we all started getting laptops and iPads, I was really skeptical of the rush to put them into schools. I thought, well, hang on. Like putting records, putting everything online, banking. I mean, of course, obviously I've caught up with the world, but it all just seemed like, wait, can we just wait 5 minutes and make sure this is like reliable? Like, do we really,
Yeah.
And actually that lemming-like rush to the newest thing was, I mean, obviously you're aware that schools are really rethinking this, and universities in particular, because nobody pays, how can you be expected to pay attention if you've got, a wonder world in front of you, and, there's some boring adult going blah, 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 whereas you could be Snapchatting with your friends or whatever. Like who wouldn't actually prefer that dopamine, hit?
Yeah.
So I don't know where we're going. I guess I'm just trying to put the brakes on some of it in terms of,
it's a value system, no?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm no saint in this stuff. I'm on it myself.
For sure. Well, this is going to go there. I mean,
look, without this, we wouldn't be talking. So I know. It's foolish to think that it's all clearly not all bad.
Yeah.
But
I guess it's the when, isn't it? I mean, when do we introduce children to this stuff? I'm with you. I feel that we could delay it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we all of us have to have some balance, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, everyone I know is trying different things to achieve a little bit more balance.
Right.
It's like, so the latest fashion in our family, and I gather this is, we're again late adapters, is putting our phones on grayscale instead of those wonderful colors. And it almost instantly, I can show you my phone. It's on grayscale now. Look at it. Oh no, it's not on grayscale. Never mind. If I look at Instagram, I have to put the colors on because it's too boring otherwise. But if you put it in black and white, it's amazing how much less ensorceling the whole thing is. It creates that little pause. So I mean, all of us have to make. There's a wonderful pediatrician and writer, Perry Class. And I interviewed her for the Enchanted Hour, and she's in New York. And she said, she basically said, like at some point every day, we have all got to get off these things. We just have to. And we have to make sure that it's there for our children.
Yeah.
That they can have we carve out a little time for them when there's no screen mediation. And again, this is the argument, really the central argument of the book is that reading aloud can provide that time. It provides that mechanism to get away from the screens, put them in the other room, and just be physically present and emotionally and mentally present with this person we love, and with some piece of writing that is that is rewarding in some way.
what was I? There it is. This is kind of asking about earlier about the world of kind of academia and the work that you do. Is that sort of like not a fight, but just of like you wanting to push this awareness that this is so important? Has that been your challenge, or is there other things that in this space, right, for the Enchanted Hour to the
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. It's funny. I think people have. I have been surprised by. Well, first of all, let me say, I think people are very receptive to this. One of the reasons I wrote the book, or one of the reasons I thought it was worth doing, because at a certain level, like telling people to read aloud is a little like saying, like, okay, drink water. Well, of course, but we all get a little dehydrated sometimes.
Yeah.
We're reminded what water does for us. It's in every cell of our body, etc. Yeah. So I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal in the summer of, I think it was 2015. And the editors gave it the title, "The Great Gift of Reading Aloud." And I was just thinking, because I'd been sort of mulling over some things some trends I saw in the children's book business that worried me. I was thinking about this technology and how it was distorting family life. And 2015, that was a long time ago. Now, if you can remember when it was all kind of new still, not new, but new-ish. And I realized that there are all these other forces in the lives of children that were maybe vociferous, a little difficult, maybe a bit onerous one way or another. And then there was this reading aloud, which I knew was an unmitigated good in my family life. I knew it was, and I knew it was in the lives of people who I'd shared this with. And I was starting to see a little bit of research into it. Anyway, so all of this is a long-winded way of saying, I wrote this piece, they gave it the title, "The Great Gift of Reading Aloud." And it went viral. And unlike some other things I've done, it didn't go viral because it made people cross. It went viral because people were so they were so moved. They were excited. It excited in some people nostalgia. It excited in others regret because they hadn't done it or they wished they had. Mm-hmm. I heard from grandparents who, had read to their kids and were grieving that their grandchildren were not getting it, and others who felt that this was the thread that had held their family together. There was just such a strong emotional response. I thought, this is something people really care about.
Right.
It touches something. There's something going on here.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the, well, what's the plural of impetus? Impeti? One of the impeti for the book was just this kind of wholehearted response to an article that discussed this stuff. So you were asking where are the areas of resistance? What I have been surprised by is some of the misconceptions that people have about reading aloud. And look, we're all, as parents, we're all trying to get it right. I gave a talk back when it was possible to do those in person at a school, and a mother came up to me and she said, "So it's okay that I'm still reading to my first grader because I don't want him to get used to me reading to him and then have him not read to himself." And I thought,
wow.
She felt like she was being, maybe I'm mischaracterizing her and imitating her, but she felt like she was being a bad mother,
right,
to continue to read to a first grader.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Honey, if he'll let you read to him when he's in college, keep going. There is no time that it's not okay. It's not infantilizing them." So that's an example of, I think, in parents' ardor to get it right, they, I think, sometimes create artificial barriers. People mm-hmm. also think if my child is not sitting obediently on my lap, they're misbehaving. There are some difficulties here, and researchers have talked about this, that there are not all parents are relaxed and easygoing, and so parents will sometimes, there are cases where they've punished children for moving while the parent, it's just, that's not helpful. This is not supposed to be a punishment. And not everybody wants to be held on the lap and read to. Sometimes
right.
They want to move around the room.
Right.
Sometimes they want to play with Legos or something, or they want to do some other thing.
Yeah.
And that's all fine. It doesn't have to be, So again, that I think is an example of a parent trying to get it right, and then the child departs from that, and they don't realize that it's okay, right? I think it's okay. So one of the things I have said many times, and I will say it again, is it's fine. This is not meant to be a punishment or a straitjacket or a cod liver oil or anything. It's just a gift that you can give each other, and it's just for fun, and you can play with it and be playful and use funny voices, or or if you don't like a book, get rid of it, read another book. There's no obligation to finish a story that doesn't captivate people. And as you will have seen, I think it's in chapter 7, if there are long passages of landscape description and your children are your eyes are glazing over,
right,
the next little bit of dialogue. I really think it's okay to do that. I think it's fine.
You earlier in this interview, I asked you about, the benefits and why it's what happens when we are read aloud to. The words I've come up with are curiosity, wonder, knowledge, imagination, and you can think of all other words that sort of when I think of like reading aloud. But one word that comes up for me is wisdom. So when I'm wondering how this practice can cultivate that wisdom muscle, because I think that today we seem to be missing it a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Yes. I mean, I think that I really love fairy tales for this.
Okay.
The idea of, what wisdom. I mean, I guess we have to talk about even what do we mean by that? But there is sort of deep folk wisdom in fairy tales. I mean, they are often very strange. They often have endings that, as modern people, we don't feel comfortable with. We don't like, and there are very, very many versions too. I mean, they're not only the single story of, say, I don't know, Cinderella, but then there are the 1,000 Cinderella stories around the world, and then the 1,000 versions of Cinderella that we can read here. I mean, there's just an immense richness in the world of fairy tales and folk tales. But a lot of folk tales in particular, well, fairy tales are a form of folk tale, I suppose. They carry the wisdom of time with them in a way, because they have been refined with time. And retelling and honing and altering and sometimes shifting shape to suit different societies, different cultures, taking characters take on different names and different attributes. But there's like a deep human wisdom. Many of them, they go back so far we don't actually know how old they are. I think I'm forgetting now, but Little Red Riding Hood, it goes back to Roman times. These are ancient stories.
Wow.
Yeah, just way back.
Yeah.
And generation after generation after generation, spinning them forward. Seems to me that there's a good deal of folk wisdom in these. There's a kind of a deep humanity, even in all the weirdness with the ogres or the wolves or whatnot. There's human truths, persistent qualities in human nature, in understanding that idea itself, that human nature works in a particular way. We think of the stories of Aesop, in which human nature is manifested in animals, where animal nature reflects on human nature. There's a lot of wisdom there in how things really are. And so in reading those, that it's a little like what I mentioned to you with the Iliad and the Odyssey. Reading Aesop, reading folk and fairy tales at home. These are in part giving your children cultural, broadening their cultural knowledge, but it's also deepening what you call wisdom. It's giving them an infusion of time-tested wisdom. You never know what they're going to do with it. I think this is something I rather love about reading aloud, in that you can let the thing loose in the air. You can't be sure how it's going to be taken. You just give it to the child, but it's up to the child to kind of incorporate and take and discard as they like, just as it was for us when we were learning. And I like that. There's something very propulsive, very generative in that idea. Almost like you can light the fire in the child, but you can't control where it goes. And that's great. That's fine. That's up to them.
Well, that's beautiful. You've had a really rich life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope I have a lot more of it to go.
Of course. Yeah. Well, you and me both.
I just want to tell you, Lauren, I did a polar plunge for the first time on Saturday.
Oh yeah, I saw that picture.
Did you see that on Instagram? Yeah, that was.
Oh my God.
Oh, it was. I have to tell you, the anticipation was. I had waves of adrenaline. I was so scared. It was like, actually, it was wonderful. And I wish I'd stayed in longer and got my head in. I didn't get my whole head in. I just went up to my neck. But yeah, this is. Why did I mention that? I mentioned that because. There's this the richness of life. Like it's cool that there are still new things to do. I'm enjoying them.
Oh well, yeah, absolutely. So I just want to end off by just bringing into just some personal experiences, like your son Paris, who wanted to be read aloud without his sisters.
Yes.
And how the rest of the girls benefited from and where they are in their life, if it's not too personal.
Oh no, I can tell you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I'm delighted to say that my eldest daughter, Molly, who's in the book, of course. She has had a baby, so we have a grandchild.
What?
Grandchild, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
Yes, I'm really thrilled. Well, I mean, my husband, we're all thrilled. We're just beyond excited about this baby. He's a wonderful little boy. His name, well, I probably won't say his name because I think they want to keep him off the internet.
Sure, yeah.
But he's magical, and I've already started. I'm his Mimi, and not his grandmother, but his Mimi. I had a different idea for a name. It didn't last 2 seconds of exposure to this wonderful little person. But his parents are reading to him every day, and I read to him when I see him, and my husband reads to him when he sees him, and I think he's going to be a highly literate little guy.
No kidding.
Yeah, the story continues, and everyone's wonderful. They're all the youngest is a teenager now, and everybody else is a young adult beyond teenage years. And the story goes on. It's really wonderful. I think
lovely.
When you have a mob of little kids at home, it feels like that's the center of life, and that when that changes, there's something I think a lot of moms feel or parents feel. A certain amount of grief when that phase is over,
Right. Yeah.
But I really feel that I now understand how misplaced that is because the story goes on, It's not always a happy story in every case, right? But no guarantee in life. But it is. We have these. I mean, if you had told me, 5 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, that I would have a grandson and do a polar plunge within a couple of months, I would have thought that's impossible. So I feel like I'm living proof that, you just never know what's in the next chapter.
No, we don't. That's what's so bittersweet about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. And this is a real extension of, it's about love, at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So thank you again for God enriching my life with this book. And
I'm really delighted and honored that you feel that way. And I'm so happy to have a chance to talk. I mean, it's been a really fun conversation. I will apologize for the length of my answers.
Oh, please.
No,
it's great.
It's just how I roll, I guess.
Awesome, Meghan.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. And I hope that everyone is watching will buy the book and read to the people you love, because I promise you will not regret it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I would encourage everyone to purchase this book. I really do. It'll give you so many things, whether you read to children, as Meghan had indicated, but just read to yourself and as adults and all that. So it's fantastic. And it's a really opportunity for us to just stop and take the moment really to be in the story and to be with ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining me today, and take good care of yourselves. Bye for now.